Hi, everybody. Welcome to the People Concerned. My name is Colleen Stathatos. I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm also the director of scattered site housing in our permanent housing department. And I'm here today to talk to you about trauma-informed care. So let's get started. All right. So welcome again. It's definitely strange doing a training where I can't see your faces, but it's also a strange time to be starting a new job. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to be talking about trauma-informed care, of course. I'm going to give you a quick overview of trauma-informed care. You're going to be getting a much more in-depth training, hopefully in the next month, called trauma-informed care training, Trauma-Informed Care 101, where we're really going to delve into these topics much more deeply. So today is just kind of a quick overview of what to expect. Hopefully you'll kind of be feeling primed and ready to learn more next month. So we're going to talk about trauma-informed care, and then we're also going to talk about trauma-informed care history at the People Concerned. We're very much in our infancy with incorporating this model here at the agency. This is not a new model, but it's newer to us here at the People Concerned, but I will say that even though it's newer, we're definitely embracing it full-heartedly. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that history and then bring you up to speed on where we are now with our work group and some of the trainings that you can expect to receive while you're here. So the first step in understanding what trauma-informed care is we need to understand what trauma is. So this definition is from SAMHSA. Individual trauma results from exposure to an event, series of events, or set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, and that has lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning, their physical, social, emotional, and spiritual well-being. So it really affects a wide range of things. An example of trauma could be a car accident. It could be a natural disaster like a hurricane. It could be child sexual abuse, neglect, physical abuse, intimate partner violence. It could also be something much broader like systemic racism. It can be something that happens once, or it can happen multiple times. It could be kind of a chronic, long-standing condition. So it can take many forms. With any trauma, though, there's a negative event that happens, which equates to a harmful experience for that person. And that goes on to have lasting effects. So some of those effects could be things like depression, anxiety, fearfulness. It could negatively impact your relationships with people. And sometimes people can develop what's called post-traumatic stress disorder, which is more of a long-standing disorder that has nightmares, flashbacks associated with it, hypervigilance, and can be pretty devastating. So trauma can affect anyone. Like I mentioned earlier, it can be a single event or a series of events. It can also be a chronic condition, so something like domestic violence or childhood neglect, something that continues to happen over and over again because you can't change your environment, you're not able to change your environment, or you've been with that person for a long time. It can affect individuals, groups, families, communities, specific cultures, and even generations. So you may have generational trauma that sort of gets passed on from generation to generation. It overwhelms an individual or community's resources to cope. That's really important because when trauma happens, the things that we use to cope with stress, they don't seem to help really anymore, which can be really scary. It produces a sense of great fear and helplessness. It often triggers fight, flight, or freeze response. Again, you're going to learn about this much more in depth, But fight, flight, or freeze is really your brain's response to a stressor. So there's a lot of research now that looks at how the brain, where we know we are able to know how the brain reacts to trauma. So someone that has experienced trauma, their brain actually looks very different from someone that has not experienced trauma. A traumatic event can be directly experienced. It can also be witnessed or affect someone that's close to the person. So witnessing trauma can actually have the same effects as if you directly experienced it yourself. You're also going to hear later on about vicarious trauma. All of you are at risk of vicarious trauma because you're working in this population, a population that has experienced quite a bit of trauma. So hearing someone's trauma stories over and over again can be traumatizing to the person, to the caregiver, to the person hearing them. And again, some of those effects of that vicarious trauma are actually the same as if you would have directly experienced them yourself. So just because you've experienced trauma, though, I want to make this clear, doesn't mean your brain is going to stay like that forever. In future trainings, you'll hear about resiliency, which is your brain's ability to kind of rebound from negative experiences. And there are actually things that we can do to develop resiliency in yourself and develop resiliency in other people. So you'll be learning about the warning signs of vicarious trauma and how to take care of yourself, and also how to interact with trauma survivors. Trauma and homelessness really go hand in hand. So trauma is often a part of someone's narrative on their pathway to homelessness. I would say that most, if not all of our clients have experienced some early childhood trauma that really shaped their development. So that could be neglect, abuse, unstable relationships, and that definitely goes on to affect, relationships in their adulthood. Trauma can also happen during homelessness. So you may be working with an individual that had extensive trauma, as a child, went on to experience it as adults, and then they became homeless and had a lot of trauma associated with that homelessness. Homelessness in itself is traumatic, right? You're waking up every morning and you're in survival mode. You don't know where you're going to be living. You might not know where you're going to be getting food or necessary resources. So homelessness in itself is traumatic. So what is trauma-informed care? Trauma-informed care is an approach to engaging people with a history of trauma that recognizes symptoms of trauma and acknowledges the role that trauma has played in their life. It's a strengths-based framework. It's grounded in an understanding of responsiveness to the impact of trauma that emphasizes physical, psychological, and emotional safety for both providers and survivors. And it focuses on rebuilding a sense of control and empowerment. So we've been talking so far about clients, working and applying trauma-informed, thinking about how trauma has affected our clients. But trauma-informed care is a model that can be applied to your work with clients and also your work with your colleagues and each other. If you're a supervisor, it can be applied to your work with your staff who report to you. It can also be directed to involve the community. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. So as an agency, right, like how can we become more trauma-informed care as an agency, and how can we become more trauma-informed care in the services that we provide to the community? So it's a model that can be applied to many different facets. It's really a paradigm shift. So we stop asking what's wrong with a person and we shift to asking what happened to them. So for example, let's say you are working with a client who every time you call them, you just met this client, every time you call them, the client is like, you're not helpful, no one's ever helped me, I don't want to work with you, never had anyone help me before, been successful at helping me before. And it might be really easy to say, like, what is wrong with this client, right? Like, I'm here to help them. Why can't they acknowledge that I'm helping them? What is wrong with them? What's their problem? That's going to create a very unique dynamic between you and the client, right? Your relationship with that client is going to be one where you might look to jump in and say, what is wrong with you? What's happening? What do I need to fix, right? And you're going to assume that you have more power than the client in that relationship. If you shift that and ask what happened to them, it changes the dynamic completely. So, man, what happened to this client where they keep calling me every time I have an interaction with them? You know, they say they're yelling at me and they feel like they're saying that nobody can help them. Man, nobody must have helped them in their life before. You know, what happened to that person to make them feel like they can't be helped? That will change everything. You're no longer in that position where you're the fixer. You're really in more of a position to say, let me understand your experience. Let me join you and meet you where you're at. And let's work together on these goals. It also relieves some of the burden on you too, right? You're moving hopefully from less of a fixer role to more of kind of a collaborator partner role. Hopefully when you start moving into the building, you're going to see this sign posted in different spots throughout the agency. This is letting everyone know that we as the people concerned practice trauma-informed care. These are the 6 tenets of trauma-informed care, or the core components. So safety, trustworthiness, choice, empowerment, collaboration, and language. So again, these components can be applied to your work with clients, your work towards your staff if you're in management, and also your work within the agency as part of the people concerned. So safety, for example, you want to create a physical and emotional safe space. So you're a supervisor, you want to be thinking about how you can create a safe space for your staff. So if your staff aren't comfortable coming to you with problems or with questions, that's going to create some real problems, right? Trustworthiness, we want to be transparent. So trustworthiness is not something that is assumed. Usually trust has to be earned, and that goes with our clients and with our colleagues, with our supervisors. So one way that we can earn that is to be transparent, to be really clear about what we can and can't do, what our limits are, what our boundaries are. We can offer explanation when there is one, and we can follow through and be consistent. I think that's a intervention that goes so unnoticed sometimes. You know, follow through and consistency are so important and can change the entire paradigm of the relationship. Choice. Listen, gather input, and offer choices. So maybe you're working on a team project. You want to be inclusive. You know, we've all probably been a part of teams that didn't feel inclusive, and it doesn't feel safe. And the kind of output from that group is usually not great. So offer choices, being inclusive. Empowerment. Remember, trauma-informed care is a strengths-based model. So we're really focusing on the strengths of that person. We want the person to feel like we believe in them. And it should be genuine. You know, we know when people aren't being genuine. So it might be hard to find strengths in people sometimes, but finding maybe 1 or 2 things, because if it's not a genuine belief, people are going to feel that. Teaching skills. We want to restore hope. Collaboration. So you're going to see in the next training a slide that talks about moving from power over to power with. So if you're in a power over dynamic, you're assuming that you have more power, you have more knowledge, you're the best person to make that decision. That can feel really punitive, right? So we want to move to a power with. So I'm maybe going to assume that you're actually the expert on your life, that I'm going to try to share power with you. I'm going to connect with you. So we have more of an equal partnership. And then language, which I think is probably one of the most important components, because it's the easiest thing for us to practice every day, I think, is really being mindful of the language that we're using to talk to people. So we want to be positive and respectful. We want to be non-punitive. We don't want to be demanding. And then we also want to be aware of our tone and our body language, those, not explicit language, but that more, the language that usually we actually see first, right? We usually see body language and hear tone first. And you'll notice that cultural consideration is part of every single one of the tenets. You can't have trauma-informed care without thinking about someone's culture and striving to create a diverse and inclusive environment. So that is super important to think about someone's culture, background, race, gender identity, really also too, even like someone's experience prior to coming into this field, right? Like if they're your staff, like what kind of culture did they have at previous employment? And how does that shape someone's lens of the world? So a little history lesson about trauma-informed care at the People Concern. Like I mentioned earlier, we are very much in the beginning stages of implementing this model at the People Concern. In 2018, I joined Jessica Beal, who's no longer here, unfortunately, at the agency, to become certified as a trauma-informed care trainer. We went to a training by South Bay Community Services in Chula Vista, California, close to Mexico. It was a 3-day intensive training, and it was focused on, it was a train the trainer training. So we had both gone to quite a few trauma-informed care trainings prior to that, but this one was specifically focused on how to become a trauma-informed care trainer. So we took all that knowledge, brought it back to the agency, and we created a work group. That work group developed Trauma-Informed Care 101, which is the training that you will be receiving next month. And by 2019, all the staff at the People Concerned had been trained in trauma-informed care, and a system for training new staff was in place, which was quite a big feat considering we are such a large organization. I think back in 2019, we had about 500 employees. I think we're closer to 600 now, so it was quite an undertaking. In 2019, a trauma-informed care supervision training was developed by Kristen Moucher and the work group. Sadly, Kristen is not here either, but we worked with her closely. She was a member of the work group, and we collaborated together to develop a training for supervisors. So this training specifically focuses on integrating the model into supervision practices, and this is for leaders within the agency. So all existing leadership have been trained, and it's been incorporated into our People Leader Academy, which is a training that all new people leaders go through. So pretty exciting. So where are we at now? The work group meets on a monthly basis. We review and adapt the trainings across the agency. We're working on several new initiatives right now, which are pretty exciting. One of them is our Trauma-Informed Care Partner Program. So that program is going to be a program where anyone in any staff could reach out to us to ask for specific partnerships or needs. So they're going to get matched to a trauma-informed care partner, someone from the work group, who's going to work with them to develop a training within their department. It might be to look at policies and procedures to change the language to be more trauma-informed. It might be joining them to have a difficult conversation with the client, or maybe talk over some difficult situations with the staff. So we're really going to be looking to kind of provide specialized training and services to what you need. And then we're also in the process of developing a few booster workshops and trainings. So in addition to providing training to the agency, we've also trained quite a bit of our community partners. This has included the LAPD, USC Police Department, and then some of our community partners that work in our housing department, like Brilliant Corners. So pretty cool. So finally, just an overview of what I've talked about already, but these are the trainings that we offer now and kind of what's to come. So once again, you will be getting a more in-depth training next month about trauma-informed care. This is really just a primer. The supervision training, if you're a supervisor, you'll be getting that as well. The work group, we're an open work group. So if you have enjoyed this presentation and are eager to learn more, ask your supervisor if you can join the trauma-informed care work group. We would love to have you. So if you ask your supervisor, they can reach out to me and we can get that started. But it's a monthly group. You don't have to join every month. If you want to join just to listen, that's cool. If you want to join and become a trainer, that's cool. So it can kind of be whatever you are most interested in. We can tailor it to you. But we would love to have more people. So that's it. It was great to spend some time talking about trauma-informed care. I wish I could meet you in person. Hopefully I will at some point. And I hope you all have a fabulous onboarding experience and time at the People Concern, and hope to see you all soon. Take care.